This is another archival upload of my previous mix critique videos. Again, I apologize for the vertical format that this video is about to switch to. This is 41 through 45. This track was sent in by a band whose name I can't pronounce. Let's check it out. It's not bad so far, but your pair of guitars is very unbalanced. The left side guitar is significantly louder than the right side guitar. Again, we have another track that's completely missing low end, like can barely hear the bass, can't hear the low end of the kick drum, like it just sounds very, very thin overall because it's missing a ton of low end in most of this. It's probably mostly due to the lack of low end, but we're also getting a lot of harsh frequencies in the high end. Like, you gotta find some of those painful frequencies, especially in the cymbals and the guitars, and get rid of those. Alright guys, that was a cool song from a songwriting perspective, but the mix needs a lot of work. You're missing a ton of low end, you got a ton of really harsh frequencies in the upper register of the guitar and the cymbals. Like, you just have way too much of that like painful 3 to 5K range in general. Also, the guitars, when you tracked them, it sounded like you probably had the mic pretty much dead center on the speaker, and that's giving you a lot of that harsh high end. You gotta move it a little more towards the edge of the speaker to get a more rounded, more pleasing guitar tone in general. The song was sent in by Justin. Let's check it out. So it's not bad so far. There's a decent amount of low end, but I'm missing a lot of the low end in the kick. I could probably use a little more of the lows of the bass, but overall not bad so far. You definitely got to take some of the mids out of the kick because it's just kind of muddying everything up. You're probably also a little heavy-handed on the high mids in the guitars. They sound pretty good, like there's a good amount of attack, there's a good amount of articulation, but it's getting to the point that it's just a little like hissy in the high end. The vocals sound really good. I really like the vocal sound. Track overall has good energy, but again, just a little too much of the high end there. Like, there's a good amount of low end, but it's competing with the amount of high end to the point that it sounds almost like there's not a lot of low end just because of how much high end there is. Everything above like 1K's just got to come down a little bit. So not bad overall, Justin. Track has good energy. I think the main things are take some of the mids out of the kick, as well as a little bit more low end of the kick would be nice. Vocals are a little muddy. Too much high end on pretty much everything except for the snare. I'm not getting any of that high end crack out of the snare, which is making the snare kind of get lost in the mix. So those are kind of the main points there, but overall not a bad mix. This track was sent in by Oscar. Let's check it out. Right off the bat, this track is way too quiet. Like, even just looking at the waveform, it's like significantly quiet. I'm just gonna turn it up right now just to get it to a listenable volume because I can barely hear what's going on. Tones aren't terrible. The whole background atmospheric thing is cool. When everything else kicked in, I like the energy there, but the intro has nothing to do with the rest of the song. Like, it sounds like two completely different songs between the intro and what I guess would be considered the first verse. All right, Oscar, so I don't want to discourage you with what I'm gonna say here. From a songwriting perspective, it was a pretty cool song. Other than the fact that the intro totally didn't fit, I would scrap that entire intro. Honestly, what you had for the outro of the song worked a lot better. Like, that definitely sounded like it belonged with the rest of the song. So really, I would just copy that outro and use that as an intro as well. But like, the bulk of the song was good. It was well written. The energy was there in terms of the performance. When we got into the main section, the drums were borderline inaudible, and you definitely overdid the time effects. It was making things really muddy. Good songwriting, again, other than the intro, but the production needs a lot of work. The song was sent in by Matt. Let's check it out. Starting everything off with a sick bass line. I love that shit. If you guys don't know, I'm a bassist mainly, so you know you're gonna grab me with a nice bass line. When everything kicks in, the bass and the drums sound like they're balanced pretty well, but the guitar is way too low. Also, your drum sound is not great. Like the source tones sound like they're probably okay, but they're not mixed well. They're not anywhere near as punchy as I would like them. They don't seem to really cut through everything like I would normally want drums to do in a song like this. So Matt, from a songwriting point of view, that's a really cool song. Like I like that it had good energy. The source tones you have recorded sound like they're really good. All the performances are solid, like they're really tight performances, and I love that. The bass tone sounds really good. Pretty much just your overall mix is not there. Like the drums are not hitting as hard as they should. They're not punchy. They don't sound as full as they could. The vocals are also kind of low there, and you have too much time effects on the vocals. Honestly, the whole mix just needs a complete overhaul. But again, your source tones sound like they're there, so it should be possible without a lot of work in the grand scheme of things. It just needs a lot more punch, a lot more overall energy, and really you got to work on your overall balance. Like just adjusting where things are with faders that alone would do wonders for this track. This track was sent in by Brendan. Let's check it out. First impressions, I like the feel of the track. It's good energy. The kick is a little overpowering. The snare is really underwhelming. You're missing a lot of overall punch in this track, especially the drums. You're missing a lot of punch from the drums. And the guitars, really. The guitars sound like they're mixed a little low. They're not really like hitting you in the face like I would normally expect a guitar sound like this to do. The kick is really driving this track, which is definitely helping a lot, but I think really back that kick down and that snare needs to come up a lot. That snare needs to be a massive crack. Like it's so far in the background. I can barely hear the snare. Meanwhile, your hi-hat is also kind of over the top of everything else. I normally try to tuck hi-hats and cymbals in general kind of right under the guitars, and you have the hi-hats over the guitars and over the snare, which is just not where it should be. So Brendan, not a terrible track overall. It's got good energy. The source tones all sound great. Honestly, I think your main problem is just an overall balance issue, specifically in the drums. Honestly, I think just rebalancing things, specifically the drums, and then maybe just adding a little bit of mix bus compression could really take this track to where it needs to be.